The gunshot echoed across the desolate landscape, shattering the evening calm that had settled over Redemption Creek. Maeve Lowell ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. This wasn't how she'd imagined her arrival in the Montana Territory in 1876 would unfold, running for her life from men who wanted the parcel of land her late father had left her. "There she is!" a gruff voice called out, followed by the sound of heavy boots approaching. Maeve gathered her tattered skirts and ran, her chestnut hair coming loose from its pins. After 3 days in Redemption Creek, she'd learned that being a woman alone with valuable property made her a target. The saloon owner had offered to take it off her hands for a pittance. The banker suggested she'd be better off selling to his associate. When she'd refused, the threats had begun. She darted between buildings, the dusty street offering little cover in the fading light. A hand suddenly reached out from the shadows, pulling her into a narrow alley. "Let me go!" she hissed, struggling against her captor. "Quiet, unless you want those men to find you," a deep voice murmured. In the dimness, she could make out a tall figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat. "Who are you?" Maeve demanded, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Xavier Sutton. I own the ranch neighboring your property." His voice was low and steady. "Those men work for Victor Caldwell. He wants your land for the water rights." Maeve tried to catch her breath. "Well, Mr. Sutton, I appreciate the warning, but I can handle—" Another gunshot rang out, sending splinters of wood flying from the building beside them. Xavier pulled her deeper into the shadows. "We need to move. My horse is behind the general store." "I'm not going anywhere with a stranger," Maeve protested, though her options were dwindling rapidly. A hint of amusement flickered across Xavier's face, visible now in a shaft of moonlight. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Miss Lowell, right now you have 2 choices: come with me or face Caldwell's men. They don't plan on letting you keep that land, one way or another." The sound of men shouting drew closer. Maeve made her decision. "Lead the way, Mr. Sutton." Xavier guided her through back alleys until they reached a magnificent black stallion. He mounted in one fluid motion, then extended his hand. Maeve hesitated only briefly before allowing him to pull her up behind him. They rode hard through the night, leaving Redemption Creek behind. The vast Montana sky spread above them, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. Despite her precarious situation, Maeve found herself marveling at the wild beauty surrounding them. "Where are we going?" she called over the thundering hoofbeats. "My ranch. You'll be safe there until we figure out what to do about Caldwell." Maeve wanted to protest, to insist she didn't need protection, but the memory of those men hunting her through town silenced her objections. For now, she had little choice but to trust this mysterious cowboy. Dawn was breaking when they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch nestled in a valley below. A 2-story house stood proudly among several outbuildings, with fenced pastures stretching toward distant mountains. "Welcome to Raven Ridge," Xavier said as they approached. A ranch hand emerged from the barn as they rode in, taking the reins as Xavier dismounted. He turned to help Maeve down, his hands strong at her waist. She was acutely aware of how improper this all was, arriving at dawn at a bachelor's ranch, having spent the night riding across the countryside with him. "Miss Lowell!" a female voice called out. An older woman with silver-streaked hair hurried from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted." Maeve shot a questioning glance at Xavier. "I sent a ranch hand ahead while you were catching your breath at the creek," he explained. "I thought you might appreciate having another woman here." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you, Mr. Sutton." Mrs. Peterson ushered Maeve inside, clucking over her disheveled appearance. "Let's get you cleaned up and fed. Then you can rest." The house was surprisingly elegant for a ranch so far from civilization. Polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books spoke of refinement that Maeve hadn't expected to find in this untamed territory. After washing away the dust of her escape and changing into a borrowed nightgown, Maeve sat at the kitchen table while Mrs. Peterson served a hearty breakfast. Xavier joined them, having shed his trail-worn coat and hat. "Caldwell won't give up easily," he said, accepting a cup of coffee. "Your land connects his property to the river. Without it, He has to drive his cattle 5 miles south to water. My father left me that land for a reason, Maeve said firmly. I won't be bullied into selling it. Xavier studied her thoughtfully. What were your plans for the property? Maeve hesitated. Her dream sounded foolish even to her own ears, but she lifted her chin defiantly. I plan to open a school. Children in these parts have precious little opportunity for education. To her surprise, Xavier didn't laugh. Instead, a look of respect crossed his features. Admirable, but challenging. This territory isn't kind to idealists. I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Sutton. A smile tugged at his lips. I'm beginning to see that, Miss Lowell. Mrs. Peterson shooed them both away from the table. Miss Lowell needs rest. You can continue your discussion later, Xavier. Maeve was shown to a comfortable bedroom, where exhaustion quickly claimed her. She slept through most of the day, waking to the sound of voices below. Night had fallen again, and she realized she'd slept far longer than intended. After dressing in the simple day dress Mrs. Peterson had left for her, Maeve made her way downstairs. She paused at the sound of arguing coming from what appeared to be Xavier's study. You're playing a dangerous game, Sutton. The voice was unfamiliar, cold and threatening. I don't take kindly to threats in my own home, Caldwell. Xavier's voice remained steady. Miss Lowell isn't selling. Accept it and find another way to water your cattle. That woman has no business owning land. She'll change her mind when she realizes how harsh life can be out here. She strikes me as remarkably determined. A harsh laugh followed. Determination won't stop a fire from spreading to her cabin or keep rustlers from stealing her livestock. Are you threatening her? Xavier's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Just stating facts. Women alone don't last long in Montana. If she's smart, she'll sell to me and head back east where she belongs. Maeve had heard enough. She pushed open the door, finding herself face to face with a corpulent man in an expensive suit, Victor Caldwell, she presumed, and Xavier, whose expression shifted from anger to concern when he saw her. Miss Lowell, Caldwell said, recovering quickly, I was just expressing my concerns for your welfare. By suggesting you might burn my property or steal my stock, Maeve kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Caldwell, but my decision is final. The land is not for sale. Caldwell's face reddened. You're making a mistake. The only mistake would be allowing myself to be intimidated by you. The rancher turned to Xavier. This isn't over, Sutton. With a final glare at Maeve, he stormed out. When the front door slammed, Maeve let out a shaky breath. Pleasant fellow. Xavier's lips twitched. Caldwell's used to getting his way. He owns half the county and has the other half in his pocket. Not all of it, Maeve said, sinking into a chair as her bravado faded. What did I just do? Stood your ground, Xavier replied, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey and offering one to her. Impressively, I might add. Maeve accepted the drink, needing its warmth. He'll make good on those threats, won't he? Xavier didn't sugarcoat his answer. He'll try, but you're not alone in this fight, Miss Lowell. Why are you helping me? The question had been burning in her mind since he'd pulled her into that alley in town. Xavier leaned against his desk, studying her. Caldwell's been squeezing small ranchers out for years. He diverted a creek that used to run through my south pasture. Cost me 100 head of cattle in the drought 2 summers ago. So this is about revenge? Justice, he corrected. And perhaps I respect your courage. Not many would stand up to a man like Caldwell. Or perhaps I'm simply foolish, Maeve murmured, taking a sip of the whiskey. It burned pleasantly down her throat. There's a fine line between courage and foolishness out here. His gray eyes held hers. Which side you fall on often depends on whether you survive. That's not very reassuring, Mr. Sutton. Xavier, he said, if we're going to be allies against Caldwell, we might as well use first names. Maeve, then. She finished her whiskey. What happens now? Tomorrow, we ride to your land. You need to see what you're fighting for, and I need to assess how best to protect it. Maeve nodded, a strange mix of fear and determination coursing through her. In Boston, she'd been merely the unmarried daughter of a professor, destined for spinsterhood after her fiancé had abandoned her for a wealthier prospect. Here, she was a landowner with a purpose if she could hold on to it. Morning came with the crow of a rooster and the smell of coffee. Maeve dressed in the riding clothes, Mrs. Peterson had altered for her trousers and a shirt that had belonged to Xavier's younger sister during her visits. The outfit was scandalously practical compared to the dresses she was accustomed to. Xavier was waiting in the yard with 2 saddled horses. He raised an eyebrow at her attire, but made no comment beyond, "Can you ride?" "My father insisted I learn," Maeve replied, approaching the chestnut mare, "though it's been some time." "Penny's gentle enough," Xavier said, helping her mount. "Just follow my lead." They rode east, the rising sun at their backs. Xavier pointed out landmarks as they traveled a distinctive rock formation, a stand of pines, a meandering creek that would lead them to her property. "How did you come to own Raven Ridge?" Maeve asked as they rode side by side across an open meadow. "Inherited it from my uncle," Xavier replied. "He was a trapper who settled here in the 50s, built it up from nothing into one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory. You speak of him with great respect. He taught me everything I know, took me in after my parents died in a cholera outbreak back in Illinois." "I'm sorry," Maeve said softly. Xavier shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Uncle Jeremiah was a good man, tough but fair." "He'd have liked you?" "Oh? Why is that?" A smile crossed Xavier's face. He admired people who stood their ground, especially when the odds were against them. They rode in comfortable silence until the landscape began to change. The rolling hills gave way to a valley, with a river cutting through it like a silver ribbon. "There," Xavier pointed. "That's your land, 500 acres of the best grazing land in the county, with a mile of river frontage." Maeve reined in her horse, taking in the sight. A small cabin stood near a copse of cottonwoods, with mountains rising majestically in the distance. The beauty of it stole her breath. "It's magnificent," she whispered. "Worth fighting for?" Xavier asked. "Absolutely." They rode down to the cabin. It was modest but solid, though clearly uninhabited for some time. Inside, a layer of dust covered the simple furniture, but the structure was sound. "Your father built this?" Xavier asked, examining the craftsmanship. "No, he purchased the land as an investment years ago. He never lived here himself." Maeve ran her hand along a wooden shelf. "He was a professor of natural philosophy at Harvard. He believed in the importance of education and opportunity. And he left it specifically to you, not your brothers or a husband." "I have no brothers and no husband." Maeve's voice tightened slightly. "My father believed women deserved the same opportunities as men, a rather radical notion in Boston society." Xavier seemed to sense the story behind her words, but didn't press. Instead, he moved to the window, surveying the land. "We'll need to establish a presence here, make it clear the property is occupied and protected." "I intend to live here," Maeve said. Xavier turned, concern evident in his expression. "Alone? After what happened in town? What choice do I have? I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "You could sell to someone other than Caldwell," he suggested. "Use the money to build your school somewhere safer." Maeve shook her head firmly. "This location is perfect. Children from surrounding homesteads could reach it easily. The river provides water, the land could support gardens and livestock for the school's needs." She walked to the doorway, looking out at the land. "This is where I'm meant to be." Xavier studied her, admiration mingling with frustration. "Then we'll need to make this place defensible. And you'll need help." "I can hire workers." "Not many will risk Caldwell's displeasure." "Then what do you suggest?" Xavier was silent for a long moment. "I have men I trust. They could help restore the cabin, build the schoolhouse, and keep watch until things settle with Caldwell." "I couldn't ask that of you." "You didn't ask. I offered." His eyes held hers. "Unless you have a better plan?" Maeve wanted to assert her independence, to prove she could manage on her own. But pragmatism won out. "I would be grateful for the assistance, but I insist on paying fair wages." "Agreed." He extended his hand, and she shook it. Noting the calluses that spoke of hard work despite his obvious wealth, they spent the remainder of the day assessing the property. Xavier pointed out where fences needed repair, where a well could be dug closer to the cabin, and the ideal location for a schoolhouse. His practical knowledge impressed Maeve, as did his respect for her opinions. As sunset approached, they prepared to return to Raven Ridge. "We'll come back tomorrow with supplies and men," Xavier said as they mounted their horses. "Within a week, this place will be livable." They were halfway back to his ranch when Xavier suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. He cocked his head, listening. "Riders," he said quietly, guiding his horse off the trail. "Could be nothing, but let's not take chances." They concealed themselves in a stand of trees just as 4 horsemen appeared on the ridge they'd crossed earlier. Even from a distance, Maeve recognized Caldwell's distinctive figure. "They're heading toward my property," she whispered. Xavier's expression hardened. "Scouting it, most likely. Let's circle around and get back to the ranch. I don't like the idea of confronting them with you present." The detour added an hour to their journey, and night had fallen completely by the time they reached Raven Ridge. Despite her exhaustion, Maeve found herself reluctant for the day to end. Xavier's competent presence had become reassuring in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Thank you," she said as he helped her dismount, "for everything." His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Get some rest, Maeve. Tomorrow will be a long day." True to his word, Xavier arrived at her door at dawn, with a wagon loaded with supplies and 5 ranch hands. The men looked capable and, to Maeve's relief, treated her with respect rather than skepticism. "This is Miguel," Xavier introduced a lean, dark-haired man. "He's my foreman and the best builder I know. He'll oversee the repairs to your cabin." Miguel tipped his hat. "Miss Lowell, the boss speaks highly of your plans for a school. My sister teaches at one in Santa Fe." Over the next several days, Maeve watched in amazement as her property transformed. The cabin was repaired, a chicken coop constructed, and the foundation laid for what would become her schoolhouse. Xavier divided his time between supervising the work and attending to his own ranch, but he seemed to appear whenever she needed advice or assistance. On the 5th day, Maeve was hanging curtains in the freshly cleaned cabin when she heard horses approaching. Her heart leapt to her throat until she recognized Xavier's voice greeting the workers outside. He appeared in the doorway moments later, removing his hat. "The place is looking better." "Thanks to you and your men," Maeve acknowledged, climbing down from her chair. "I can actually envision living here now." Xavier's expression grew serious. "About that, Caldwell's men have been watching. They haven't interfered yet, but I don't trust their restraint." "I won't be intimidated out of my own home," Maeve said firmly. "I'm not suggesting you should be, but perhaps it would be wiser to wait until the schoolhouse is completed and you have a proper establishment here before taking up residence." Maeve wanted to argue, but saw the logic in his suggestion. "How much longer?" "Another 2 weeks, perhaps 3. He hesitated. "In the meantime, I've spoken with Pastor and Mrs. Wilson in town. They've offered you a room in their home if you prefer not to remain at Raven Ridge." The suggestion stung more than it should have. "You're eager to be rid of me?" Xavier looked startled. "Not at all. I simply thought you might be more comfortable with a respectable family, given the impropriety of your current arrangements." Maeve hadn't given much thought to propriety since arriving in Montana, but she suddenly realized how her extended stay at a bachelor's ranch might appear to others. "You're right, of course," she said stiffly. "I wouldn't want to damage your reputation." Xavier's mouth quirked. "My reputation isn't what concerns me, Maeve." "Then what does?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Your safety primarily, but also—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "The longer you stay at Raven Ridge, the harder it becomes to remember that you're not meant to be there permanently." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with implications neither was ready to address. Maeve broke the tension. "I'll speak with the Wilsons tomorrow." The following day, Maeve moved her few belongings to the parsonage in Redemption Creek. Mrs. Wilson was a kind, if somewhat overbearing woman who clearly viewed Maeve as a project in need of guidance. "A woman alone running a school? It's very modern," she commented as she showed Maeve to a small but comfortable bedroom. "Though I imagine you'll be looking for a suitable husband eventually." "My focus is on establishing the school," Maeve replied diplomatically. Mrs. Wilson patted her hand. "Of course, dear, though I must say, Xavier Sutton has shown remarkable interest in your welfare. He's considered quite a catch, despite his unconventional background? Mr. Sutton has been a kind neighbor, nothing more, Maeve insisted, though the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. Life in town proved informative. Maeve learned that Caldwell's influence extended to the mayor and sheriff, but not everyone supported his methods. Several families expressed enthusiasm for her school, particularly those who couldn't afford to send their children east for education. Xavier visited the parsonage twice that week, ostensibly to update her on the progress at her property, though his conversations often extended well beyond that topic. They discovered shared interests in literature and natural science, and Maeve found herself looking forward to his visits with embarrassing eagerness. On Sunday, Maeve attended church services, acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. Xavier sat several pews behind her, nodding politely when their eyes met. After the service, as parishioners gathered outside, Victor Caldwell approached, his wife, a faded, nervous woman, trailing behind him. "Miss Lowell," he boomed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I understand you're planning to open a school on your property." Maeve steeled herself. "That's correct, Mr. Caldwell. A noble endeavor. My associates and I have been discussing how we might assist such a worthy cause." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "In fact, I'd like to make you an offer. Sell me your land at a generous price, and I'll donate a plot in town for your school, along with funds for construction." The offer was clearly meant to seem reasonable to onlookers, placing Maeve in an awkward position if she refused. Before she could respond, Xavier appeared at her side. "An interesting proposal, Caldwell," he said smoothly. "Though Miss Lowell's current location offers unique advantages for families from outlying homesteads." Caldwell's expression hardened. "This doesn't concern you, Sutton. As a neighbor who stands to benefit from educated ranch hands in the future, I disagree." Xavier's tone remained pleasant, but Maeve sensed the steel beneath. Mrs. Wilson intervened, perhaps sensing the brewing confrontation. "Miss Lowell, won't you join us for Sunday dinner? You too, Mr. Sutton, if you're available." The invitation effectively ended the standoff, though Caldwell's parting look promised this wasn't over. During dinner, Pastor Wilson offered insights into the community's dynamics. Caldwell came here 15 years ago with Eastern money, bought up land during the drought when folks were desperate. Some say not all his acquisitions were entirely legal. "Has anyone challenged him?" Maeve asked. "A few. Most either sold out eventually or suffered unfortunate accidents." The pastor's expression was grim. "The territorial governor has promised to send a federal marshal to investigate complaints, but government moves slowly out here." After the meal, Xavier offered to walk Maeve to the general store, where she needed to purchase supplies. Away from the Wilsons' watchful eyes, he spoke candidly. "Caldwell's public offer was a tactical move. He's trying to position you as unreasonable if you refuse." "I gathered that," Maeve sighed. "What would you do, Xavier?" He considered the question seriously. "I'd weigh what matters most. If it's just having a school, his offer might make sense. If it's about the specific land and what it represents..." He shrugged. "Some things are worth fighting for, even against long odds." Maeve nodded, appreciating his honesty. "My father believed education could transform lives, but he also believed in standing against bullies. I can't help feeling that accepting Caldwell's offer would betray both principles." Xavier's gaze softened. "You're very much your father's daughter, aren't you?" "I hope so," she replied. "He was the best man I've ever known." They reached the general store, where Maeve selected thread, fabric, and other necessities. As Xavier helped carry her packages back toward the parsonage, a commotion erupted down the street. People were pointing toward the hills east of town, where a column of smoke rose against the blue sky. "Fire!" someone shouted. Xavier's expression darkened. "That's in the direction of your property." Without hesitation, he lifted Maeve onto his horse, then mounted behind her. They rode hard, joined by several townsfolk who recognized the potential danger of a wildfire in the dry summer conditions. As they crested the final ridge, Maeve's heart sank. The cabin was engulfed in flames, with the partially constructed schoolhouse already reduced to smoldering timbers. Miguel and the other workers were frantically trying to contain the spread to the surrounding grassland. Xavier leapt from his horse and joined the firefighting efforts. For hours they battled the blaze, finally containing it as dusk fell. The cabin was a total loss, as was the schoolhouse. Only the charred chimneys stood as testament to what had been there. Maeve stood amidst the ruins, numb with shock and grief. Xavier approached, his face streaked with soot. "It wasn't an accident," he said quietly. "Miguel found coal oil traces and hoofprints heading back toward Caldwell's ranch." "He actually did it," Maeve whispered. "He burned it all." Xavier's jaw tightened. "We'll rebuild." "With what?" This represented most of my inheritance. Tears threatened, but Maeve fought them back. "Perhaps I was foolish to think I could make a difference here." "This isn't about the buildings," Xavier said firmly. "It's about Caldwell thinking he can take whatever he wants through intimidation." He took her hands in his. "If you give up now, he wins. Is that what your father would want?" The question struck home. "No," Maeve admitted, "but I don't see a path forward." "Then let me help you find one." His grip tightened on her hands. "Come back to Raven Ridge tonight. Tomorrow, we'll make plans." The ride back to Xavier's ranch was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Mrs. Peterson fussed over them upon arrival, providing hot baths and clean clothes before serving a late supper. Afterward, Xavier led Maeve to his study, where he poured them each a drink. "I've been thinking," he said, handing her a glass. "Your schoolhouse needs to be rebuilt. My men need something to do through the winter months when ranching slows. I propose a partnership." Maeve raised an eyebrow. "What kind of partnership?" "I provide the labor and materials. You provide the education." "That's extremely generous. But I couldn't accept such charity." Xavier shook his head. "Not charity, investment. In return, you'll teach the children of my ranch hands alongside the others. Many of my workers are Mexican or indigenous, and their children have few educational opportunities." The proposal was ingenious, allowing her to accept his help without sacrificing her pride. Still, Maeve hesitated. "Caldwell will just destroy it again." "Not if we build it here, on Raven Ridge." Maeve stared at him. "Here? But that defeats the purpose of making education accessible to all the local children." "Temporarily," Xavier agreed, "until Caldwell is dealt with. My ranch is better defended, and he'd think twice before attacking it directly. Once the territorial marshal arrives and investigates the arson, you can relocate to your original property." It was a practical solution, but something in his tone made Maeve wonder if there was more to the offer. "And in the meantime, I would live here. There's plenty of room, and Mrs. Peterson would ensure all propriety is maintained." He met her gaze directly. "Unless you have objections to my company." "None," Maeve said softly, "but others might talk." "Let them." Xavier set down his glass and moved closer. "Maeve, I've been alone on this ranch for years. Since you arrived, it's felt different, alive in a way it hasn't before." The confession stirred something deep within her. "I've only known you a short time, long enough to know what kind of person you are." His hand brushed her cheek. Brave, principled, determined. Maeve leaned into his touch, her defenses crumbling. "I came west to escape being unwanted," she admitted. "My fiancé in Boston decided I wasn't worth the trouble when a more advantageous match presented itself." "He was a fool," Xavier murmured. "Perhaps. But it made me question my value. If I couldn't be wanted for myself, at least I could make myself useful through teaching." Xavier's eyes darkened. "When you say you were unwanted, I want you to know something." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You've been wanted all my life. I just didn't know it until you arrived." The words unlocked something inside Maeve. All the disappointment and rejection she'd carried from Boston seemed to dissolve in the face of this man's genuine regard. Their first kiss was tentative, a question being asked and answered. The second was deeper, a promise taking shape between them. When they finally parted, Maeve knew her world had irrevocably changed. "Stay," Xavier said simply. "Not just until the school is built, but after. Stay and make Raven Ridge your home." "You're proposing?" "Inelegantly, perhaps." He smiled. "But yes, I love you, Maeve Lowell. I think I began falling for you the moment you stood up to Caldwell in my study, though I was too stubborn to recognize it immediately." Maeve laughed softly. "And I thought you were merely being neighborly all this time. Was I that subtle?" "Mrs. Wilson certainly wasn't. She's been hinting about your eligibility since I arrived at the parsonage." Xavier groaned. That woman could matchmake at a funeral. His expression grew serious again. This isn't how I planned to do this. I wanted to court you properly, give you time. Time is a luxury we may not have, with Caldwell determined to drive me out. Maeve took a deep breath. Yes, Xavier Sutton. I'll stay and make Raven Ridge my home. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Word of the arson spread through the county, turning public opinion against Caldwell. Xavier sent for a justice of the peace, and they were married in a simple ceremony, attended by his ranch hands and a few townsfolk, brave enough to defy Caldwell's influence. Construction began on a schoolhouse near the main ranch house. Designed to accommodate up to 20 children, Maeve threw herself into preparations, ordering books and supplies from catalogs, developing a curriculum, and getting to know the families whose children would become her students. Meanwhile, Xavier rode to Helena to meet with the territorial governor, presenting evidence of Caldwell's criminal activities. He returned with news that a federal marshal would arrive within a month to investigate. Their evenings were spent planning their future together. Xavier proved to be a thoughtful husband, considerate of Maeve's opinions, and supportive of her ambitions. Their differences in background complemented rather than divided them, his practical ranching knowledge balancing her academic approach. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Xavier said, "I received a letter from the land office today. They've reviewed your claim to your father's property and confirmed its validity. Caldwell's counterclaim has been rejected." Maeve leaned against his shoulder. "That's wonderful news, though I find myself less concerned about that land than I once was." "Oh, have you given up on your school?" "Not at all, but I've realized the school can exist anywhere. What matters are the children and the education they receive." She looked up at him. "My home is here now, with you." Xavier's arm tightened around her. "I never expected to find someone who would understand this life, much less embrace it. And I never expected to find someone who would value my mind as much as anything else." Maeve smiled. "We're both fortunate in our unexpected discoveries." The marshal arrived as promised, a no-nonsense man named Jenkins, who established temporary headquarters in Redemption Creek. His investigation quickly uncovered evidence of Caldwell's involvement in the arson, as well as previous incidents of intimidation, fraud, and even murder. When confronted with the evidence and the prospect of a trial, Caldwell attempted to flee. He was captured at the territorial border and returned to face justice. The trial was brief, the verdict decisive. 20 years in the territorial prison. With Caldwell's threat removed, Maeve and Xavier discussed what to do with her original property. "We could sell it," Xavier suggested. "Use the money to expand the school here. Or we could build a second school there," Maeve countered. "For children from the eastern homesteads who can't travel this far." "Always thinking of others," Xavier said fondly. "It's one of the many reasons I love you." They eventually decided on a compromise. The original property would become an outpost of their main school, with a resident teacher they would hire and supervise. Miguel's sister, Elena, agreed to come from Santa Fe to take the position. The Raven Ridge School opened in November 1876, with 12 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. Maeve found teaching in this frontier setting far more rewarding than she had anticipated. The children were eager to learn, their parents grateful for the opportunities she provided. Xavier often stopped by during lessons, sometimes contributing his own knowledge of local geography, wildlife, or ranching practices. The students adored him, especially when he brought along new foals or calves for impromptu natural history lessons. As winter settled over Montana, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a glistening wonderland, Maeve and Xavier found contentment in their shared life. The evenings were filled with reading by the fire, planning for the ranch's future, and deepening their understanding of one another. Christmas brought the community together for a celebration at the school, with parents and children gathering for songs, recitations, and a feast that combined traditions from the various cultures represented. Maeve, watching the joyful gathering, felt a sense of fulfillment that surpassed anything she had imagined when leaving Boston. "Happy?" Xavier asked, finding her by the window as the party continued around them. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I have news that might make you happier still." His eyebrows rose questioningly. "According to Dr. Mitchell, We should expect an addition to our family by late summer, Maeve said, her eyes shining. Xavier's face transformed with wonder. A baby? You're certain? The doctor is. I've suspected for a few weeks now. He lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace, then set her down gently as if she might break. I'll build a cradle tomorrow, and we should expand the nursery wing, and Maeve laughed, placing a finger on his lips. We have time, my love, nearly 7 months of it. As news of the pregnancy spread, the community embraced the prospect of a new Sutton with enthusiasm. The school continued to thrive, with plans for expansion as more families moved into the area, drawn by the educational opportunity and the more equitable atmosphere that had developed since Caldwell's removal. In July 1877, as summer heat shimmered across the Montana landscape, Maeve gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor, after Xavier's mother. The birth was difficult but ultimately successful, with both mother and child emerging healthy. Xavier, holding his daughter for the first time, wore an expression of such tender awe that Maeve felt her heart might burst with love for them both. She has your eyes, he whispered. And your determination, Maeve replied, recounting how the midwife had commented on the baby's strong will during the delivery. Eleanor proved to be a bright, curious child who thrived in the ranch environment. When she was 2, Maeve gave birth to their son, James, creating the family neither had dared to dream of before finding each other. The school at Raven Ridge became known throughout the territory for its excellence, attracting families who settled nearby specifically for the educational opportunity. Maeve trained additional teachers, eventually establishing a small teachers' college that prepared young women, and occasionally men, to serve in remote communities throughout Montana and beyond. Xavier's ranching operation prospered as well, incorporating innovative techniques he learned through agricultural journals and correspondence with experts back east. Their partnership extended to all aspects of their enterprises, with Maeve managing the finances for both the school and ranch, while Xavier contributed practical insights to the educational curriculum. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised Maeve with a trip to Boston, where she reconnected with old friends and introduced her family to the society that had once seemed so important to her. The visit confirmed what she already knew. Her life in Montana, with all its challenges and rewards, was infinitely more fulfilling than the restricted existence she would have led had she remained in the East. Their return journey included a stop in Chicago, where Xavier had arranged meetings with potential donors for Maeve's expanding educational initiatives. Her passion and practical results impressed the philanthropists, resulting in funding that allowed for the construction of 3 additional schools across the territory. Back at Raven Ridge, watching their children help the ranch hands with the spring calving, Maeve reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Xavier asked, joining her on the porch. "How different my life would have been if my Boston fiancé hadn't rejected me," she replied honestly. "I thought it was the end of my world then." Xavier slipped his arm around her waist. "And now? Now I understand it was just the beginning." She turned to face him. This man who had changed everything. "I came west feeling unwanted, discarded. You showed me that I'd been wanted all along. I just hadn't found the right person yet." "We found each other," Xavier corrected gently, "and built something neither of us could have created alone." As the sun set over Raven Ridge, painting the sky in glorious shades of gold and crimson, Maeve leaned against her husband's shoulder, perfectly content. The unwanted Boston spinster had found her place in this wild, beautiful land, alongside a man whose quiet strength had helped her discover her own. Together, they had transformed a simple patch of Montana territory into something remarkable, a home, a school, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And it had all begun with those simple, powerful words whispered in a moment of vulnerability. "You've been wanted all my life.